I wanna believe in the truth, but only see what I'm shown. Got the freedom to choose, but can't decide on my own. Follow what the group is thinking, bottle up my intuition till it's popping out the box that I don't fit in. I wanna believe in the
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Asperger Studios presents Reviews. Today on the show, I'm going to be reviewing the Neurodiversity Affirming Handbook written by Mott and Dani Rodwell. As we can see, it's got a beautiful front cover with a picture of a brain that's very catching and very pleasing to the eye. And then as we look down, we learn a little bit more about them. We learned that Megan has ADHD herself and has children who have autism and ADHD. And Dani has ADHD and learned later that she has ASD as well. Both these ladies are experiencing both of these disabilities, so they're in the now and they know what they're talking about. As we flip through the pages, we look at their table of contents. And as you can see, it says these pages can be kept in a binder, printed and dispersed for team members, or printed and posted on classroom bulletin boards for quick reference. This is very good for teachers because a teacher can put this up on the wall on the bulletin board, and a child who has ASD can learn about his own traits and his own behaviors, and he can go home and tell his parents about it. Now let's look at some of these chapters and see what they go over. They have neurodiversity principles, neurotypical and neurodivergent brains. What is neurodiversity? That is a very good question because in today's day and age, people don't know what the term neurodiversity means and what it defines. Neurodiversity affirming practices, they talk about ADHD, types of ADHD. They talk about autism spectrum, neurodiversity affirming language. What is executive functioning? This is very important because in today's age, people hear, oh, he has executive functioning disorder, and people don't know what that means. This is going to go over what executive functioning is and the type of things that can help those who have it out. They talk about stimming, which is very important. Masking is another very important thing. They talk about the diagnosis because this is a question I'm pretty sure a lot of people have on their minds. What is the diagnosis process for ADHD or ASD? They talk about compliance-based or ND affirming, the joys and interests, sensory differences, motor differences, communication turns, and communication considerations. They go over the Gestalt language process, the double empathy problem, social communications differences, the deal with empathy, supporting feelings and emotions, social skill practices to avoid, and communication strategies. They talk about the neurodivergent play and play strategies. Then they go into addressing challenging behaviors. What are challenging behaviors? Common causes and dysregulation, self-injurious behavior. Then they talk about neurodiversity affirming care, a closer look. The risks of non-affirming therapy, common ways affirming care can show up. Neurodiversity affirming therapy is neurodiversity and mental health. This is very important. Meltdown, shutdowns, and burnouts. This is very important because people would like to know what the difference is between a meltdown, a shutdown, and a burnout. Now, to a layman, when we have a meltdown, it looks like a temper tantrum, but it's really not. In my mind, a meltdown is when our mind can't process all that information coming in and we shut down. A shutdown is when the stage right before a meltdown, and a burnout is when we're totally exhausted, like from being out all day, running errands and doing things. We come home, we're totally burnt out. We just can't, we just want to crawl into bed and get to sleep. Then they go into materials to try. My tool book, how big is the problem for me, and my feelings chart. And then they talk about neurodiversity in the IEP. This is so very much important because parents today need to know if you have a child who is disabled, who has ADHD, ASD, dyslexia, an IEP can benefit them right away because it's a program that lays out what needs your child has and what the school can help. And they go over it with reframing how we speak and write, ND affirming accommodations, ND affirming IEP goals, and ND affirming collaboration with home. And then they talk about home collaboration pack, and they have QR codes that will lead caregivers to an explanation, which is very good for a parent, because you pin this whole thing up on the wall, and then if you have a caregiver, someone babysitting your child, they can scan that code and it'll give them a video of how to deal with somebody. If your child has ASD or ADHD or any of the other disabilities, it will give them an explanation of how they can work with that child. Now let's look at it. Neurodiversity principles, the information that all education team members should know. Neurotypical, neurodivergent. I love it how they don't put verse neurodivergent. It's not one versus the other. It's either you have one or you have the other. And that's very affirming. It's comforting. It's not saying, hey, I'm better than you. It's saying, hey, we're two different people. We have two different things going on with our brains. I love how they explain what neurodivergent is right here. A brain functioning that differs from what considers typical. In processing and learning, a common acronym for neurodivergent is ND. But I love how they talk about this right here. A lot of people hear the word neurodivergent and all they think about is ADHD or ASD. But what they don't think about is epilepsy, Tourette syndrome, dyslexia, fetal alcohol syndrome, and much, much more. And this is very important. There are so many disabilities that fall under the neurodivergent label, and people need to know that. And then they go over to the term, what neurodiversity is, and they give you a definition. Individual differences in the brain functioning regarding normal variations within the human population. And I love how they give you this definition and they explain that they got it from the dictionary. This is so very much important. They use the term different, not less, which was coined by Dr. Temple Grandin, which is so much important. It's saying, hey, yes, we are different, but we are not less of anybody like anybody else. We can do everything you can do, just in more time. And then they talk about the neurodiversity affirming practices, viewing through a lens of different, not deficits, which is very good. You have a hands-on learner, you have somebody who processes skills. She's non-speaking. He tells great stories. He's joyed by hand slapping, and he's good with technology. And then they go into ADHD, and they break it down to attention deficit hyper disorder, which a lot of people which help explains what it is. They talk about common differences and this common strategies, which is very important because people think, oh, they have ADHD. They're not good at anything. But really we are, because ADHD helps. And then they go into the types of ADHD. You have your inattentive, you have your hyperactive, impulsive, and you have your combined, which is like what I am. And then they talk about it's currently underdiagnosed in females due to several factors. And then they go into autism spectrum disorder. And they talk about the differences and the strengths. And this is very important because people need to know, yes, we have our differences, but we also have our strengths. And this is very much an important thing to know. Especially, this is very helpful because ADHD and ASD overlap. They have a lot of the common traits, and it's very important to not mix and match them. And then they talk about the neurodiversity affirming languages, and this is very important. To use words instead of autism, try autistic. Instead of obsession, try special interest. Instead of red flags, try traits. Instead of low and high functioning, try describing the student and their sport needs. What they're doing here is they're taking a negative, turning it positive. And this is what it's all about, is don't see what we have as a negative, but see it as a positive light. And it's eye-opening because then you get to understand that child. You get to understand that person. And then they go into executive functioning. And this is where I'll end looking at the chapters, but I'll go into this. And this is very important because they explain a little bit about executive functioning. They say that things that can help us are timers, note-taking support, clearing our calendars, due date stamps on assignments, visual cues, visual organization, and just some examples of executive functioning supports. And this is very important. When you have an executive functioning disorder, you have trouble with things like being organized, keeping on time, taking your notes. And And I'll leave off by saying this. Let me stop share. I will say this. This is one of the most important handbooks I've ever written for the neurodiversity world. This is very beneficial for teachers, for caregivers who are babysitting kids who have neurodivergence, because this can be an eye opener. This can help from making a mistake, from not knowing if the child's having a temper tantrum or a meltdown. This is one of the most crucial essential books I will ever recommend to anybody in the neurodiversity world. And I'll be happy, I will push this as much as I can and say I recommend anyone who is a teacher, who is a caregiver, who is a parent of somebody who's neurodiverse, please pick up this book. And I highly recommend it to everybody out there. See you in the next one.